An already fragile transition to democracy in Myanmar, but sectarian tensions are running high and people are dying in the west of the country. What does the fighting mean for the future of the country? Could attempts at reform be halted because of the ethnic unrest? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Stephen Cole. Myanmar is on a very uneven and a fragile road towards democracy. But 7 people have been killed in 3 days of rioting in the country's western region. The coastal state of Rakhine saw Buddhists once again fighting Muslims, including Rohingya migrants, described by the United Nations as one of the most persecuted minorities anywhere in the world. In response, the government has imposed a state of emergency in the area and the UN is relocating its staff. Wayne Hay reports from Bangkok in neighbouring Thailand.
Rakhine State is now under military control. More soldiers, police and hardware have been flown in, trying to help keep the peace. The build-up came as President Thein Sein used a televised national address to declare a state of emergency in the northwestern part of Myanmar.
What's currently happening in the Rakhine State is about putting grievances, hatred and desire for revenge at the forefront based on racial and religious grounds, and that's why anarchic actions are becoming widespread.
The violence and burning started after a Buddhist woman was raped and murdered last month. The Rohingya, who are a minority Muslim group, were blamed, and since then more people have been killed on both sides of the religious divide. In Thailand, a small number of Rohingya gathered to show support for their people in Myanmar, most of whom are stateless. They're given no official status by Myanmar or neighbouring Bangladesh.
We don't have any hope, because it is happening all the time. So we need international help, we need the, UN intervention.
The trouble is proving an early test for the mainly civilian government which was formed after the election in 2010. It's one of many areas of ethnic and religious tension in Myanmar, and the president warned the unrest could spread.
If this happens, we'd like the general public to be aware that the stability and peace, the democratization process and the development of the country, which are only in transition right now, could be severely affected and much would be lost.
Much has already been lost in Rakhine State. Many of those whose homes have been burnt are now sheltering in evacuation centres. Wayne Hay, Al Jazeera, Bangkok.
So, what's behind this ethnic tension? Is it religious, Buddhist, against Muslim, or is it a case of a minority being persecuted for being stateless? To try and answer those and some other questions, I'm joined by, in London, NURULISLAM, president of the A.R.U Rohingya National Organisation. In Bangkok, Nguyen Yint, spokesman and head of foreign affairs at the National League for Democracy. And in Washington, D.C., P.WAKARUDDIN. He's a Rohingya from Myanmar and Director General of the A.R.U Rohingya Union, a group supported by the Organisation of Islamic Conference. But first, to Nguyen Yint. Nguyen Yint, the Rohingyas are a stateless Muslim group. Myanmar considers them to be illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. But this most recent violence is not a new outbreak, is it? The issue has been reoccurring now for half a century.
That's correct, because in Burma we are widely considered that the Rohingya is the migrant from the neighboring countries. But in late 70s, that they called that the Hinda, the program, and then accepted more than 240,000 of the Rohingyas who were refugees in Bangladesh and then cross the border and then resettled in Burma. And since then, that's going to be racial tension, and then also the military government has been using a different type of suppression against all the minorities, not only the Rohingyas but also the ethnic minorities. And then plus, then that's going to be a democratic uprising in 1988. Then that's going to be all of the citizens have been abused by the military hunters.
NURULISLAM, several days of rioting, up to 7 people are thought to have died, although other estimates are higher. What caused this violence? What sparked it this time, and who is carrying out the killing?
Well, this is on 3rd of June. There was a killing of Muslim pilgrims, some Muslim pilgrims, about 8 people, and all with driver and the female conductor, altogether 10. And they are killed by a mob of Rakhine extremists. Rakhine is a Buddhist community in Arakan, while they were returning home to Rangoon. And then the following day, there was a disturbance in Akiap. This is a Sitwe, the provincial capital of Arakan. And then on 8th of June, this was after Friday prayer, some Muslims tried to have to say prayer for those who were mercilessly murdered. And that time, the security forces obstructed them and fired. And on the spot, 2 people died. And then this is the violence has spread, and this had been a statement issued by with calculation, and the security forces started with the Rakhine extremists. They were rampaging the Muslim villages and killing the Muslims. And then they're firing and opening, setting fire on the Rohingya Muslim houses.
So, Nurul, you're saying some extremists are responsible here, but I want to go to Professor P.WAKARUDDIN. Professor, what's your assessment of the violence? There are, for example, estimates that considerably higher numbers than 7 have been killed. Do you see this as extremism of some kind of mob violence?
Yes, it is. I believe that it is extremism of violence incited by racial hatred, and the Rakhine element, ethnic Rakhine element, in collaboration with the local Burmese forces, Lone Ting, who are supposed to provide security, and the local police have collaborated, coordinated. These are all coordinated attacks. Actually, if you could remember, this violence, rioting has been well planned ahead of time. As you could remember, calling back to 2010 before election, they have organized such things to start this kind of rioting to destabilize the region, and so that massive refugees movement can start again, so people, the victims, could move to Bangladesh just to initiate a new refugee crisis. Now, these have been in works for quite some time, but they were looking for a triggering point. And unfortunately, the triggering point, as Mr. NURULISLAM has indicated, started from the massacre of brutal, gruesome killing of these pilgrims in Kandwe.
Professor, are you saying the security forces are deliberately targeting Muslims?
They are deliberately targeting Muslims. We have reliable reports. We have pictures that security officers are watching the Rakhine mob setting fire on Muslim houses. We have documentation. And unfortunately, several international media were influenced by Rakhine media, Rakhine staff of these Voice of America and RFA and others, that gave them wrong information. And also this international media, controlled by some Burmese and Rakhine elements, are talking to local Rakhines, not Rohingya. So they are getting false information and they are broadcasting, and then that's inciting more violence.
Well,
so
I'll come back to that
a vicious cycle.
Nguyen Yint, who is to blame here? Are we talking about the ruling party? Because as we've all agreed, Myanmar is on this very delicate road to democracy. It's a fragile transition. Could this violence, these kind of clashes, impact on that move towards a democratic country?
That's correct, because the current crisis in the Rakhine State, it seems to be it's a politically motivated, plus the ethnic tension. It's the long way, the ethnic tension. But I'm only wanted to say that I'm really sad about, sorry about the victims, both sides. And then not only Rohingyas, and I saw a lot of pictures, and I read a lot of reports saying that right now that the 16,000 the Rakhine refugees who had no sheltering, different locations, and then yeah, I agree that some area the Afghanis are minorities in some area being victimized, and in some area the Rohingya Muslims are being victimized.
You must have a very natural sympathy with them.
Sir?
You must have a very natural sympathy, as coming from, you represent a party that itself has been victimized for many, many years. How can you help their cause in Parliament now that you are part of Parliament?
Yeah, that's correct. Then this is very important for that the government call for that the national reconciliation, and then also the government should provide the space of the ethnic and religious leader in this, not only the Rohingyas, but also the other ethnic area conflicts. So I'm really worried that those tensions drive back to the military domination. That also I'm worried for the president who thinks saying the current peace and reconciliation and the country move forward. And then right now all the crisis would push back to the square one, and then military will take over the country because of the country is very instability. This situation that right now we are facing.
Well, that's something you have to work out in Parliament, isn't it? Because democracy is not just about elections, it's about human rights as well. NURULISLAM, do you see this as a case of ethnic tension, or is it a government deliberately targeting minorities?
Actually, this is the thing is, first of all, I would like to say that we are not a migrant people. We are not illegal immigrant. But that is for a long time, the government and extremists, even it includes some academics as well, Rakhine academics, they are making anti-Rohingya propaganda, both inside and outside the country, that the Rohingyas are not part of the Burma society and they are illegal immigrants. That is totally false. We are part and parcel of the Burma society. We have got a long history that cannot be denied by anyone. But these, for a long time, they are trying to mechanize the whole
So if you've been part of Myanmar for a very long time, answer the question. I mean, are you deliberately being targeted because you're not officially part of any state?
We are especially targeted because on grounds of ethnic and religion.
So is this, in your words, an ethnic cleansing of some kind?
This is exactly. So I agree with this ethnic cleansing. It is ethnic cleansing because about 1.5 million of the Rohingya has already been expelled from the country. They are either expelled or they have had to leave the country to save their lives. These people are mainly living in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand, Malaysia, and many other places of the world. This is exactly these are the evidence. And on the other hand, what happened? The problem. Started on 8, and then today this is 12. This is about 10 days. For 10 days, the Rakhine extremists, equipped with lethal weapons and supported by the security forces, they are killing the Rohingya people. And then this is about by this time about 1,000 people has already been killed. And then in the 14 villages in Akiab city, this city has already been destroyed, and 2,700. This is a great humanitarian crisis.
And a humanitarian crisis, well. Professor P.WAKARUDDIN, is this a humanitarian crisis involving Muslim against Buddhist? Is it religious, or is there more to it?
It is both. It is both. It is primarily ethnic cleansing, based on ethnicity and race, but being a Muslim is another factor, as they are xenophobic, and they do not tolerate Islam, and they do not tolerate people of South Asian descent or appearance. It does not have to be, you do not have to be from Bangladesh or India or somewhere else, but if you look like South Asian, they use the name, a derogatory name called Kala, and there's a hate coming out from there. And then religion, being Muslim, is another thing that adding to that. So it's both ethnic cleansing and the religious persecution.
The United Nations believes the only real solution to the Rohingya's plight lies in Myanmar, recognizing them as their own. Is that likely, Professor?
Yes, United Nations should supervise. Actually, they have proposed, Myanmar government has agreed to have a census, and reportedly in 2014. And this census is going to be critical for Rohingya. They will have to maintain international standard how to do the census, strictly supervised by the international community, with full cooperation by Burmese government. At that point, if international community continue to insert pressure on Burmese government to address these Rohingya human rights and political issues, there is a ray of hope. Without intervention from international community and full cooperation from the Burmese government, there is no hope in this issue. This is going to escalate more and more. This rioting is a fuel in the fire. And as you know, the Rohingya ethnic minority has been under persecution for 50 years.
Right. Well,
so
what I want to move on now to whether or not these clashes are in fact a distraction on that road to democracy, because that's a key point. As we mentioned earlier, Myanmar is seen by many as moving slowly towards this goal. But for a country which has been under military control for 5 decades, the latest clashes could threaten some of those reforms that the president has been introducing since taking office last year, very gently and very slowly. In April, the opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi of the NLD was elected to parliament in that by-election. The EU has agreed to suspend most sanctions against the country, as have the US and Australia. But how the government handles this latest crisis will be a vital test of that programme. So, Nguyen Yin, do you see it as a test?
That's correct. But also the nation building after 5 decades of the under military regime, then all the ethnic leaders or religious leaders put the emotional aside and then work on that, how we live together. Otherwise, you know, the blame game, we never end the blame game. So this is why Aung San Suu Kyi put her emotional aside and then, you know, work with the reality. So that's a very important. And then she was ready to help the president and all the, you know, work with the ethnic leaders and then religious leader, because in Burma we need a peace and stability, and then we cannot, get a solution with only an emotion and only a hatred, only a, you know, blame each other. We never end that the vicious cycle. So we need a peace, and we work on the peace. Thank you.
Well, Hillary Clinton said the situation, in her view, underscores the critical need for mutual respect among all ethnic and religious groups. So, NURULISLAM, what are the differences between the ethnic groups?
Yes, Burma is the multicultural and multi-ethnic countries. Even the agreed-upon principle of the Burma Union is unity in diversity. On the principle, this unity in diversity means to recognize the difference of one culture, one language, and there should be mutual, to recognize it, and there should be mutual respect. This is the unity in diversity. But in fact, the racism, I should say that systematic racism, is so much interest in Burma that they do not, the majority people, particularly in the Arakan side, the Buddhist community, they don't want to tolerate the Muslim community. Although we, despite the fact that we have thousands of years of history, they are not going to accept us. They always treat us as unwanted people. And then whatever it may be, The problems of the Rohingya in particular and the Muslim in general started in Burma right from 1962 military takeover. Seriously, I mean.
Indeed.
But yeah. Then
Professor, it's a good point, NURULISLAM, but I want to go back to Professor WAKARUDDIN. America too has been watching this rioting and called for an end to violence, as America is invariably doing, but without backup of any kind. Do you think internationalizing this confrontation, this violence, help the people there in any way?
Yes, that's a very important question that you have asked. Internationalizing this current situation, crisis in Burma, is the key. The key, I must emphasize. If international community, international media cannot get access to northern Rakhine State, we will not know, international community will not know the depth and width and extent of this crisis we are facing. And as you know, the Burmese authority, whatever decide in the Naypyidaw up there, on the ground the situation is very different. They are themselves, the forces on the ground are not respecting their own law. That's why there are so much violation despite this imposition of state of emergency. So internationalizing is the key. International community must intervene. As I emphasize, this only hope.
That's unlikely, isn't it? Because America isn't going to intervene. It's too sensitive a place. And the European Union thinks the security forces are handling the confrontation well. Catherine Ashton said, "We believe the security forces are handling this difficult intercommunal violence in an appropriate way." So you're not going to get any international help. So it has to be a diplomatic path. And where's that path going to lead to?
What I meant international help, I meant intervention through diplomatic means, by engagement with Myanmar government, inserting pressure on Myanmar government, and holding responsible to Myanmar government for this, all what is happening in Rakhine State.
Professor,
this
thank you.
afternoon I will be meeting.
Yes, you're good. Professor, I must move on.
Yeah, this afternoon. This afternoon, I'm meeting with the Assistant Secretary of State. I'm going to bring up these issues that America must take a more active role, more serious role, and convince and exert pressure on Myanmar government to address this issue peacefully and diplomatically.
Thank you, Professor. Nurem Yint, little time, I'm afraid. What do the Rohingyas want? Do they want a state?
I'm not really sure that what they really expect, but we should have, respect the human rights, basic human rights. That's very important. But it's a funny thing is that when before 2010 and so many Rohingyas received the national ID card for the 2010 election, because most of the USDP member of the parliaments from the area of the Rohingyas are because they were elected. Because this is the ruling party manipulation in that area as well. Then the other ethnic leaders, Rohingya leaders, should also look at it that this is what kind of, this is not the ethnic, confrontation. Yeah, of course, this is the ethnic confrontation. But the other look at the broader, perspective and to solve the problem. How we should solve the problem, because that's a very important, is that the political leaders, ethnic leaders, and religious leaders should, participate in that the process.
NURULISLAM, without land ownership or jobs, not much is going to change in the short term for the Rohingyas, is it?
Actually, this is we welcome what the present government of Tan Singh has given process for democratization. But unfortunately, no change has touched the Rohingya people yet. And then what happened in Burma today is the Rohingya citizenship issue. This is completely unfounded by all legal extent that we are the very good citizen of this country. Even you look at, from the British colonial period, from election held in British colonial period up to the present 2010 election, including 2008 referendum, Rohingyas were allowed to vote and, right to vote and right to be elected.
I would like to thank all of you in London, NURULISLAM, in Bangkok, NURULISLAM, and in Washington, D.C., WAKARUDDIN. It doesn't look as though the tensions in Western Myanmar are going to disappear after almost half a century of violence and confrontation. Neither government in Bangladesh nor Myanmar seems committed, at the moment anyway, to any long-term solution. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send us your feedback, email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazira.net. Thanks for watching. From me, Stephen Cole. Goodbye.